I heard my future daughter-in-law say something about me that I don't think I can ever unhear. And the worst part isn't even what she said, it's what it did to my son. Because he thinks I'm the one who pulled away from him for no reason. He thinks he failed me somehow. And I let him believe that. I know how that sounds. I do. It sounds cruel. It sounds like something a bad mother would do. And maybe there's a part of me that is. I've been holding this in for 3 years now. 3 years of replaying the same moment in my head, over and over, like if I just listen to it enough times, it'll change. Or I'll understand it differently. Or I'll finally know what I was supposed to do. But it doesn't change. It just sits there. And everything since then has felt off. Like something shifted that day and never shifted back. I don't even know where to start. I've tried, I swear. I've tried saying this out loud before. In my car mostly. Or late at night when I can't sleep. I'll start talking and then I stop halfway through because it sounds ridiculous. Or dramatic. Or like I'm making something bigger than it is. But it's not small. It never was. I'm 45. I have 2 kids. My son, Marcus, he's 26 now, and my daughter, Layla, she's 22. I've been divorced for, about 12 years now. Marcus was 14 when it happened. Old enough to understand too much, you know? Old enough to see things kids shouldn't have to see. And after everything fell apart, Marcus changed. He got quiet. Responsible. Careful. Like he stepped into a role nobody asked him to take on. He became the one who kept things steady. The one who didn't cause problems. The one who managed everyone. Even me. And I leaned on that more than I should have. I know that now. I didn't see it then, not fully, but looking back, yeah. He carried more than a kid should. But he turned into a good man. A really good man. The kind who thinks before he speaks, who tries to keep the peace, who puts other people first even when he shouldn't. I'm proud of him. I need to say that. None of this changes that. Not even a little. He met Danielle about 4 years ago. And she was fine. That's the simplest way to put it. She was fine at first. Pretty, confident, worked in marketing, had this loud laugh, like she didn't care who was listening. They moved fast. Faster than I was comfortable with, if I'm being honest. But I didn't say anything. I told myself, this isn't your place. You've done enough damage in your own marriage. Don't start inserting yourself into his. So I stayed quiet. They moved in together after maybe 8 months. Then they got engaged. And when he called me to tell me, he sounded happy. Really happy. And that wasn't something I heard from him often, not like that. So I cried. Not sad crying. Just relief, I think. Like maybe he had found something safe. Someone who made him feel less like he had to carry everything alone. And I wanted that for him. I still do. But I wasn't perfect in that situation either. I need to be honest about that. I was around a lot. I called him often. I showed up sometimes without really thinking it through, nothing extreme, but enough that Danielle noticed. I could tell. She was always polite, always smiling, but there was this tightness in her face. In her jaw. And this look she'd give Marcus sometimes, like, you deal with her. And he would. Of course he would. He always did. So I tried to step back. I really did. I told myself to give them space. Let them build their life without me hovering. And then Thanksgiving happened. 3 years ago. That's where everything changed. They offered to host that year. Marcus asked if I'd come early to help cook, and I said yes. I was actually looking forward to it. It felt like progress, maybe. Like we were all finding a rhythm. I got there early that morning. Let myself in with the key he'd given me. I remember texting him before I came, he said it was fine. The apartment was quiet except for music playing somewhere in the back. I assumed they knew I was there. So I started unpacking groceries in the kitchen. And then I heard Danielle's voice. She was on the phone. And she didn't know I was there. I should have said something. I know that. I should have made noise, called out, anything. I almost did. I really did. But something in me just stopped. And that's when everything started to go wrong, or maybe, that's when I finally heard the truth I wasn't supposed to hear. She said, "No, she's not here yet, she's not coming until noon." And I remember, this is such a small detail, but it won't leave me. I remember thinking, that's weird, because I was there. I was standing maybe 10, 15 feet away from her, in the kitchen, holding a bag of sweet potatoes like an idiot. And for a second, I almost laughed. Like, oh, she just doesn't know I'm here yet. Normal. Innocent. Then there was a pause. And she said, I know. I know. But I don't have a choice. He wants her here. If I say no, it becomes a whole thing. And something in my chest just tightened. Because now it wasn't just a casual update. It wasn't just, she's not here yet. It was something else. Something underneath it. I still didn't move. I should have. I know I should have. Even now, saying it out loud, I'm thinking, why didn't you just say something? Why didn't you just make your presence known and stop it right there? But I didn't. I just stood there. And she kept going. She doesn't even see it, she said. She genuinely thinks she's being a good mother. It's almost sad. I don't think I breathed for a second after that. It's strange what your brain does in moments like that. I didn't react the way I thought I would. There was no immediate anger, no explosion. It was more like everything slowed down. Like my body didn't quite catch up to what I was hearing. I remember gripping the plastic bag tighter. The sweet potatoes pressing into my palm. And I told myself, okay, this is just venting. People vent. I've vented. I've said things about people I didn't fully mean, just to get something off my chest. So I tried to minimize it. Right there in that moment. I tried to shrink it down into something manageable. She doesn't like you. You already knew that. This isn't new. But then she kept talking. And that's when it stopped feeling like venting. The thing is, she said, Marcus knows too. Like, on some level, he knows what she did to their family and he just protects her anyway. I don't even know how to describe what that felt like. Because now it wasn't just about me and her. It was about Marcus. It was about this shared understanding she was claiming they had. Like there was this whole version of me, this whole narrative about me, that they both quietly agreed on behind my back. And I didn't know anything about it. I just stood there thinking, what does he know? What does she think I did? What story is she telling where I'm the villain and he's, what? Defending me out of obligation? It didn't make sense. But it also scared me, because a small part of me thought, what if she's not entirely wrong? And I hate that part. I really do. But it was there. Still, even then. I think I could have recovered from it. I could have walked out, made noise, pretended I hadn't heard anything important. We could have all just gone on with the day. It would have hurt, but it would have been survivable. But then she said something else. And this is the part that never leaves me. She said, I've already talked to his dad about it. His dad. Robert. My ex-husband. And the way she said it, it wasn't hesitant. It wasn't like, oh, I mentioned something once. It was casual. Familiar. Like it was normal. Like it was something that had been happening. I've already talked to his dad about it. I felt. I don't know, Exposed? That's the closest word I have. Like something private had been taken and handed to someone who has every reason in the world to see me in the worst possible light. I haven't had a real conversation with Robert in over 10 years. Not a real one. Not anything beyond logistics, and even those were tense, at best. He moved away. 3 states over. Marcus barely talks to him. A phone call on birthdays, maybe. That's it. And somehow, Danielle had built a connection there. About me. I didn't know what they talked about. I still don't. I don't know what he told her, what version of our past he gave her, what details he chose to include or leave out. But I know him. And I know he wouldn't paint me kindly. So now, standing there in that kitchen, I wasn't just hearing my son's fiancée criticize me. I was hearing that she had gone to the one person most likely to confirm her worst assumptions about me, and believed him. Built something out of it. And I just froze. Completely. I don't know how long I stood there. Time got strange. Her voice went quieter at some point, like she had moved farther down the hall. I could hear her laugh once, just a quick laugh at something the other person said. Like this was normal. Like this was just conversation. And I was still standing there, holding those stupid sweet potatoes, trying to figure out if I had just imagined everything. Eventually, she hung up. And for a second, I thought, okay, this is it. Say something now. Move. Make a noise. Let her know you're here before she walks in. But I didn't. I stayed exactly where I was. 90 seconds later, maybe less, maybe more, she walked into the kitchen. And the second she saw me, her face just dropped. All the color drained out of it. And in that moment, I knew. I knew she understood exactly how much I had heard. And what happened next, it was so small, so normal on the surface, but it set the tone for everything that came after. She just froze for a second. Like her body hadn't caught up to the situation yet. And I remember thinking, say something. Say anything. Ask her who she was talking to. Ask her what she meant. Just, don't let it sit there like that. But I didn't. I don't know why. I've asked myself that question so many times. Was it shock? Was it fear? Was it me trying to keep control of the situation? Or was it something else? Because the truth is, I've spent a lot of my life avoiding confrontation. Especially when I feel like I might not like the answer. And standing there, looking at her face, seeing the panic in it. I think some part of me already knew that whatever came out of her mouth next, I wouldn't be able to unhear that either. So instead, I stayed calm. Too calm. I texted Marcus that I was coming early to help. And even now, repeating that, it sounds so neutral. So harmless. Like I was just clarifying something. But it wasn't that. Not really. It was me saying, I was here. I'd been here. I heard you. And she knew it. She swallowed, kind of nodded, and said, oh. I didn't hear you come in. And I said, I know. That was it. That was the entire exchange. No confrontation. No explanation. No denial. Nothing. Just 2 sentences each. And somehow, that silence said more than any argument could have. She turned and walked out of the kitchen. Quickly. Like she needed to get out of the room. And I just stood there for another second, staring at the counter like I'd forgotten what I was doing. Then I put the sweet potatoes down. And I started peeling them. Like nothing had happened. I don't even recognize that version of myself, if I'm being honest. The one who could just switch like that. Who could take something that big and fold it down into something manageable, something quiet. But that's what I did. A few minutes later, Marcus came in. And he was completely normal. Smiling, warm, arms open like always. He hugged me, asked about the drive, made some joke about me bringing too much food like I always do. And I matched him. I smiled back. I hugged him. I answered his questions like nothing had happened. Like I hadn't just heard his fiancée talk about me like I was some problem to manage. Like I hadn't heard her say she'd been talking to his father about me. We cooked together. The three of us. Danielle came back in, composed now. Completely composed. You wouldn't have known anything had happened if you had walked in at that moment. She even smiled at me. Asked me if I needed help with anything. And I said no. And that was the rhythm for the rest of the day. My sister arrived. Layla showed up. The house filled with noise, with conversation, with that kind of holiday energy where everything feels busy enough that you don't have to sit too long with any one thought. And I played my part. I laughed when I was supposed to laugh. I asked questions. I passed dishes. I complimented the food. At one point, I caught Marcus looking at me, just for a second longer than usual. Like he was checking something. Like he was making sure I was okay. And I smiled at him. I made sure I looked okay. Because I couldn't be the person who ruined this for him. That thought kept repeating in my head all day. Don't ruin this. Don't make this about you. Don't take this moment away from him. Because he was happy. He was proud to be hosting. Proud of the life he was building. Proud of her. And I had already been the reason his life fell apart once. When his father and I split. I couldn't be that again. So I swallowed it. All of it. And I told myself I was doing the right thing. I really believed that, at least in that moment. I told myself, you're being mature. You're giving everyone the benefit of the doubt. You're not jumping to conclusions. But if I'm honest, there was another voice underneath that one. Quieter, but persistent. Saying, you're scared. Scared of what she would say if you confronted her. Scared of what Marcus would say if you told him. Scared that maybe you wouldn't like his answer. And I ignored that voice. I went through the entire dinner like that. Smiling. Nodding. Pretending. And then I went home. And that's when it started to settle in. Because it's one thing to ignore something in the moment, when there are people around, when there's noise, when there's distraction. It's another thing entirely to sit alone with it. And I remember sitting in my car in my driveway that night, engine still running, just staring ahead. And replaying it. Every word. She doesn't even see it. Marcus knows too. I've already talked to his dad. Over and over and over. And each time I replayed it, it felt heavier. Like it was attaching itself to everything else I thought I knew. About her. About my son. About myself. And that's when something shifted. Not outwardly. Not in a way anyone else could see right away. But inside me, something closed. Like a door I didn't even realize was there. And I didn't open it again. Not the next day. Not the next week. Not even when Marcus called me a few days later like nothing had changed. Because that was the beginning of something I didn't understand yet. But I would feel the effects of it for years. The next few days after Thanksgiving, everything looked normal. That's the part that still confuses me, even now. There was no immediate fallout. No awkward confrontation. No message from Danielle trying to explain what I'd heard. Nothing. Marcus called me like he always did. Hey, Mom, just easy, familiar, like nothing had shifted. And I answered the same way. I kept my voice steady. I asked about his week, his work, what they were doing over the weekend. He told me something about a project, something small, and I responded like I always would. But inside, I was listening differently. Every word felt like it had something underneath it. Like there was a second conversation happening that I wasn't part of. And I hated that feeling. I kept thinking, does he know? Does he know what she said? Does he know I heard it? Has she told him? Did they talk about it after I left? Or worse, was she right? That question, it stayed with me. Marcus knows too. What did that mean? What exactly did he know? What version of me had he accepted without ever saying it to my face? I started replaying old memories. Moments I hadn't thought about in years. Times during the divorce when things got messy. When I wasn't at my best. When I was overwhelmed, distracted, trying to hold everything together and failing more than I'd like to admit. And I started seeing them differently. Through her voice. Through that lens of, she doesn't even see it. And I began to wonder, what if she's right about parts of me I've been avoiding? That's the thing that makes this so complicated. If she had been completely wrong, completely unfair, I think it would have been easier to dismiss. But she wasn't. Not entirely. And that made it stick. So instead of confronting it, I adjusted. Slowly. Quietly. I started calling Marcus less. Not all at once, not in a way that would be obvious. Just, a little less often. If I used to call twice a week, I made it once. If I thought about calling, sometimes I'd stop myself. Give them space, I told myself. But that wasn't the whole truth. The truth was, I didn't know how to talk to him anymore without hearing her voice in the background. Every time he said, "Hey, Mom, I heard, she thinks she's a good mother." Every time he asked how I was, I thought, what do you actually think of me? And I couldn't ask him. I couldn't bring myself to ask him directly, because asking meant risking the answer. So I avoided it. And the distance, it started there. Small enough that you could almost pretend it wasn't happening. But it grew. Every interaction felt slightly off. Like we were both adjusting to something neither of us was naming. And I know he felt it. He's always been perceptive like that. Quiet, but observant. He notices changes in people, even when they try to hide them. So it didn't take long. About 6 months later, he called me. And the moment I heard his voice, I knew something was different. He sounded careful. Measured. Like he had practiced what he was going to say before he dialed. "Hey, Mom, do you have a minute to talk?" And my stomach dropped. Because I knew, this is it. This is the conversation I've been avoiding. But I still wasn't ready. I said, of course, like it was nothing. Like I wasn't already bracing myself. And he started slowly. He said he felt like I'd been distant. Not in an accusing way. That's what made it harder. He wasn't angry. He wasn't defensive. He was gentle. That's Marcus. He said Danielle had noticed it too. And when he said her name, I felt something tighten again in my chest. Not anger exactly. Not even resentment, not fully. Just tension. He said it was making her feel like she'd done something wrong. And that part, I almost reacted to. Because I wanted to say, you don't get to feel confused about this. You don't get to act like you don't know where this is coming from. But I didn't say that. I stayed quiet. He kept going. He said it was putting stress on him. That he felt stuck in the middle. That he didn't understand what had changed, but he could feel that something had. And then he said, I just want to understand, Mom. Did I do something? Did we do something? And that broke something in me. Because there it was. Exactly what I had been trying to avoid. My son, thinking this was his fault. And in that moment, I had a choice. I could tell him the truth. I could say, Marcus, I heard her that day. I know what she thinks of me. I know she talks to your dad. I know there's something being said about me behind my back, and I don't know where you stand in that. I could have said all of it. I even started to. I opened my mouth, and I remember thinking, just do it. Just say it. Get it out. But then another thought came in, louder. What if he defends her? What if he says, Mom, she was just venting? Or worse. What if he agrees with her? What if he says, you don't see it either? I don't think I could have handled that. Not from him. So instead, I chose the easier answer. The safer one. I told him I was going through some personal things. That I hadn't realized I'd been distant. That I was sorry if it felt that way. And I said, I love you. I'll do better. Even now, saying that, it feels like, I don't know, like I betrayed something. Not him. Myself. Because I had the truth right there. In my hands. And I chose not to give it to him. And he accepted it. Of course he did. He said, okay, Mom. I love you too. Just like that. No pushing. No digging deeper. No forcing me to explain. He trusted what I said. And that might be the part that hurts the most now. Because that was the moment I could have fixed everything. And I didn't. And what happened after that? Wasn't dramatic. It was worse than that. It didn't fall apart all at once. That's the part people don't really understand when I try to explain it, even in my own head. There was no big fight. No moment where someone said something unforgivable and everything just snapped. It was quieter than that. Slower. Like something wearing down over time. After that call, I told myself I would do better. I really believed I would. For a few days, maybe even a couple of weeks, I made an effort. I called him. I texted first. I tried to sound like myself again. But it felt forced. Not fake exactly, just unnatural. Like I was performing a version of myself I didn't fully trust anymore. Because every time I talked to him, there was this voice in the back of my mind whispering, he knows something about you that you don't know he knows. And I couldn't shake it. So the effort didn't last. I started pulling back again. Slowly at first. Skipping a call here, replying a little later there. Letting conversations end without extending them the way I used to. And he noticed. Of course he did. But instead of pushing harder, he adjusted too. That's who he is. He meets people where they are. Even when it costs him something. So if I stepped back a little, he stepped back too. Not out of anger. Not out of resentment. Just adaptation. And that's how the space between us started to grow. Not because either of us wanted it, but because neither of us knew how to stop it. Months went by like that. Conversations got shorter. Less frequent. Less open. We still talked. It wasn't like we cut each other off completely. There were texts. Quick calls. Birthdays. Holidays. All the things that make it look, from the outside, like everything is fine. But it wasn't the same. The closeness was gone. That easy, unspoken connection we used to have, it just faded. And the worst part? There was never a moment where I could point and say, that's when it happened. Because it wasn't one moment. It was 100 small choices. Mostly mine. And then, about a year ago, something happened that I wasn't even supposed to hear. Layla came over one afternoon. We were just sitting in the kitchen, talking about nothing important. And she mentioned Marcus. Casually. Like it was just something he had said in passing. She said, yeah, he's been kind of down lately. He said he doesn't really understand what changed with you. And I felt that same, tightening in my chest again. But I didn't say anything. I just nodded, like, yeah, that makes sense. And then she said, he told me he feels like he failed you somehow. I had to look away when she said that. I think I laughed a little, actually. Not because it was funny, but because I didn't know what else to do with that kind of pain when it shows up out of nowhere like that. He feels like he failed you. My son. Carrying guilt for something he didn't even cause. And the reason he was carrying it was because I didn't tell him the truth. Because I chose silence. Because I decided, over and over again, that avoiding a difficult conversation was somehow better than risking what might come from it. And in doing that, I let him create his own explanation. And kids, no matter how old they are, they do that, don't they? When something doesn't make sense, they look for a reason. And more often than not, they land on themselves. What did I do wrong? And I let him sit in that. For years. That's the part one can't. I can't make peace with. Not fully. Because whatever Danielle said about me, whatever version of me she believes in. This part? This is mine. I did this. Not intentionally. Not maliciously. But, it still happened. And I've tried to justify it. I really have. I told myself I was protecting him. That I didn't want to put him in a position where he had to choose between me and the woman he loves. Because they're married now. They got married last spring. And I was there. Front row. Watching him stand there, waiting for her. Watching her walk down the aisle in this beautiful dress, smiling like she had everything she ever wanted. And I cried. Real tears. Not just because it was a wedding. Not just because it was emotional. But because I love him. I love him enough to sit there and swallow everything I know and still hope, genuinely hope, that he's happy. And he looked happy. That's the thing that complicates all of this even more. Because what if my silence helped preserve that? What if saying something back then would have created a fracture in his life that he wasn't ready for? I don't know. I go back and forth on that constantly. One minute I think, you did the right thing. You protected him. And the next minute I think, no, you protected yourself. Because the truth is, I was afraid. Afraid that if I told him what I heard, and he chose her anyway, I wouldn't recover from that. If I said, your wife talks to your father about me, and he said, Mom, she was just venting, or worse. Mom, she has a point. I don't think I could survive hearing that from him. So I chose not to find out. I chose this, quiet distance instead. And now I'm sitting here, 3 years later, with a son who barely talks to me. Who thinks it's his fault? And I still haven't told him the truth. But lately, that silence feels heavier than the truth ever could have. And I think I'm running out of ways to justify it to myself. Because what I've been avoiding all this time might already be too late to fix. I keep coming back to the same question. What am I actually afraid of now? Because if I'm being honest, really honest, it's not just about what happened 3 years ago anymore. It's about everything that's happened since. All the space. All the silence. All the moments where I could have said something, and didn't. At some point, it stops being about one conversation you overheard, and it becomes about who you've been choosing to be ever since. And that's the part one don't like looking at. Because it's easier to focus on Danielle. On what she said. On the fact that she talked to my ex-husband. It's easier to sit in that hurt and say, this is where it started. But the distance between me and my son? That didn't come from her. Not entirely. It came from me, deciding, over and over again, to stay quiet. And I hate that. I really do. Because when I picture him, I don't see the 26-year-old man who barely texts me now. I see the kid. The one who used to fall asleep in the back seat after baseball practice, his head tilted to the side, mouth slightly open, and I'd sit in the driveway for 20 minutes because I didn't want to wake him. I see the teenager who tried so hard not to cause problems when everything was falling apart at home. I see the young man who called me when he got his first apartment key and said, Mom, I did it, and his voice had that mix of excitement and fear in it that made my chest ache. That's who he is to me. That hasn't changed. So how did we get here? How did we go from that to this careful, polite version of a relationship where we send birthday texts and holiday messages like we're distant relatives instead of what we used to be? And the answer is, I know how. I just don't like it. Because every time I had a chance to be honest, I chose not to be. Every time I thought, this is the moment, say it now, I found a reason not to. It's not the right time. He seems stressed. They just got engaged. They're planning a wedding. I don't want to ruin this for him. There was always something. And underneath all of those reasons was the same fear. What if he doesn't choose me? And I know how that sounds. I do. It sounds selfish. It sounds like I was making it about me. But when you've already lost so much once, when you've already been the person who watched your family break apart, there's this instinct that takes over. You start protecting what's left. Even if the way you're protecting it is slowly destroying it. And I think that's what I've been doing. I told myself I was preserving the relationship. But what I was actually preserving was the illusion of it. Because a relationship without honesty isn't real. Not fully. It's just maintenance. Surface level. Safe. And safe has cost me my son. Or at least, the version of him I used to have. I don't know if it's completely gone. I don't know if it's something we can get back. But I know this, what we have right now, isn't enough. Not for me. And probably not for him either, even if he doesn't say it. Lately, I've been thinking about writing him a letter. Not a text. Not a quick call where I panic halfway through and change the subject. A real letter. Something he can read on his own time. Something where I can say everything without being interrupted by my own fear. I've imagined it so many times. I'd tell him what happened that day. I'd tell him exactly what I heard. I wouldn't twist it. I wouldn't exaggerate it. Just the truth. I'd tell him that I chose not to say anything. That I thought I was protecting him, but I see now that I was also protecting myself. I'd tell him that none of this is his fault. That he didn't fail me. That if anything, I failed him by not trusting him enough to handle the truth. And I'd tell him that I love him. That part's easy. It's everything else that feels impossible. Because even now, after everything, the fear is still there. What if he reads it and gets angry? What if it causes problems between him and Danielle? What if she tells him I misunderstood? That I'm twisting things? That I'm trying to create drama? Or, what if he already knows? That thought, it won't leave me alone. What if she told him that I heard that conversation? What if he's been waiting all this time for me to say something, and I never did? What if he thinks I'm the one who doesn't care enough to fix it? I don't know which version is worse. But I do know this. Every day I stay silent. I'm choosing the same outcome. Distance. Regret. And a version of my life where I slowly become less important to him. And I can't keep doing that. I can't keep pretending that this is okay. Because it's not. He deserves the truth. Even if it's messy. Even if it causes tension. Even if it changes things. Maybe especially if it changes things. Because at least then, whatever we have moving forward will be real. Not this, careful, quiet version we've been living in. I don't know if it'll fix anything. I don't know if we'll ever get back to what we were. But I do know that I don't want to lose him like this. Not slowly. Not silently. So. I think I'm going to write the letter. I think I have to. I just don't know what happens after he reads it. And maybe that's the part I've been avoiding all along. Because once he knows the truth, I don't get to control the outcome anymore. And what happens next might finally answer the question I've been too afraid to ask for 3 years.